This week we begin the third of the 5 books of the Torah, the book of Vaykra, Leviticus. And we're told about all of the various different offerings that are brought on the altar. And then in chapter 2, verse 13, God tells us to make sure to add salt to all of the offerings. Not to bring any offering that's missing the salt of the covenant of your God. Add salt to all the offerings. With all that repetition in the verse, it sure seems like salt is very important. And it's linked to our covenant with God. Why? Because our covenant with God is meant to be permanent. And so is the Torah. Unchanging, immutable. And we're meant to preserve it. Salt is a preservative. It keeps things fresh. It keeps them from rotting. But if all we're doing is merely preserving the Torah and keeping our covenant with God, we'll certainly get reward, but that could become boring. It could become rote. Kind of like setting out all of the ingredients on the counter for a tricky recipe, and then carefully following the recipe, adding each ingredient in the right amount, in the right sequence, and then when you're done roasting or broiling or grilling or sautéing or braising, you try your creation and it's bland. And you're trying to figure out, where did I go wrong? I was so careful to follow that recipe to a T. And then you remember, I forgot to add a touch of salt. So you add a little bit, you try it again, and now it's absolutely scrumptious. So maybe God, by telling us to salt our offerings, is reminding us that it's not enough to just have the ritualistic externalities, to just go through the motions of observance. You also have to remember to add a pinch of passion, some emotion, some enthusiasm, some excitement. But as one of my all-time favorite characters in literature would say, that is not all. Oh no, that is not all. For any of you who have had the opportunity to visit me for a Shabbos, you know that my wife's homemade challah is delicious enough to serve to the Queen of England in her palace. It doesn't need any salt added, and yet we add salt. Why? Because our table, each of our tables, is meant to remind us of the holy altar on which sacrifices were brought. And as we now know, it was very important to add salt to those offerings. Why? Think about it. Salt adds flavor to other ingredients. That's its calling card. Even though it's not a food on its own. You wouldn't eat salt that's plain. You'd only eat it in conjunction with something else to make that other something else tastier. Now, if you had to describe that calling card, that signature trait in human terms, you'd call it pure kindness, existing only to benefit others. So maybe that's another lesson. God's telling us when we set out to imitate Him, remember His endless acts of pure kindness and try to imitate them in our personal dealings.